There is a shipwreck sitting in the Thames Estuary right now, less than a mile and a half off the coast of England, that the British government knows about, monitors every single year, and has chosen not to remove for 80 years. Its masts are visible above the waterline at all times. You can see them from the shore. Locals know exactly what it is. And what is sitting inside that hull, slowly corroding in 15 meters of water, is 1,400 tons of live WWII munitions, cluster bombs, 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, and enough high explosive that if it ever goes off, the government's own scientific studies say it would send a column of water and debris nearly 3,000 meters into the air, generate a wave 5 meters high, destroy the town of Sheerness, and send a tsunami up the Thames toward London. This is not a historical problem. The wreck is collapsing right now. In 2023, a survey found the forward section had shifted 10 to 15 centimeters. In the same survey, a section of deck near Hold 3 was found to have started collapsing on the port side. The Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, which publishes regular survey reports on the wreck available on the UK government's own website, has described the deterioration as accelerating. Its own 2009 report stated that structural collapse was not imminent, but was getting closer. That was 16 years ago. I'm Jack, and today I want to tell you the full story of the S Richard Montgomery. Not just how it got there, but why it is still there, why nobody has moved it, what happens if it goes off, and why the British government has been managing this situation quietly for 80 years rather than dealing with it. Because this is not a story about a WWII wreck that sank in the ocean somewhere nobody lives. This is a live bomb sitting in one of the busiest shipping lanes in Europe, 3 miles from a town, 5 miles from Southend-on-Sea, and a few dozen miles from central London. The Richard Montgomery was a Liberty ship, one of over 2,700 built in the United States during WWII to haul war materials across the Atlantic. Liberty ships were not elegant vessels. They were functional, mass-produced, and built as fast as possible. The design was so standardized that a single shipyard could launch a completed hull every few weeks. The Montgomery was built in Jacksonville, Florida in 1943, and by the summer of 1944 she was crossing the Atlantic as part of Convoy HX-301, loaded with 6,225 tons of munitions. Bombs, detonators, fuses, cargo destined for the war in France following the D-Day landings. On August 20th, 1944, the ship arrived in the Thames Estuary and was directed to anchor at the Great Nore anchorage near Sheerness in Kent, a gathering point for vessels waiting to join smaller convoys into the Channel. This is where things went wrong. The area around Sheerness Middle Sand is treacherous, a network of shifting sandbanks in relatively shallow water. The ship's anchor dragged. In the falling tide, the hull grounded on the sandbank, settling amidships on the crest of it. The weight of the cargo, the design of the hull, and the position of the grounding combined to create what engineers call hogging. The center of the ship bending upward under pressure while the bow and stern sagged on either side. The hull plates forward of the bridge began to split almost immediately. A salvage operation began within days. Working under difficult conditions in a busy wartime anchorage, crews managed to remove approximately half the cargo before the situation became untenable. The ship broke its back. The forward section flooded completely. By the time the salvage operation was abandoned, 1,400 tons of munitions remained entombed in the flooded forward holds. The wreck was left where it lay, the masts remained visible above the waterline, a prohibited zone was established around it. And the British government has been deciding what to do about it ever since. The inventory of what is still inside it is detailed and public, sourced from MCA survey reports published by the UK government. Hold number 1 contains approximately 1,433 tons of munitions, including fragmentation bombs and bomb clusters. Hold number 2 contains cluster bomb units and component parts. Hold number 3 contains nearly 600 500-pound bombs, over 1,000 1,000-pound bombs, and approximately 2,000 cases of cluster bombs. These are not vague estimates. They come from the manifest of the ship and from sonar surveys conducted at regular intervals. The MCA knows almost exactly what is in there. The question has never been what is inside it. The question has always been what to do about it. The arguments against removing the cargo have remained consistent for 80 years, and they are not entirely unreasonable. The explosives have been submerged in seawater since 1944. Water is a reasonable insulator against detonation. The TNT at the core of most of the ordnance is relatively stable in its current state. Disturbing it, cutting into the hull, lifting the bombs, moving them through water, introduces risks that the government has repeatedly assessed as potentially greater than simply leaving it alone. The closest historical comparison is the SS Kiels, a munitions ship that sank 6 kilometers off the coast of Folkestone in 1946. In July 1967, a salvage attempt on the Kiels resulted in 3 separate accidental detonations. Nobody was killed, but the wreck was damaged further, ordnance was scattered, and the salvage was abandoned. The lesson the British government took from the Kiels was that attempting to remove the cargo of a deteriorating munitions wreck is not necessarily safer than leaving it. That argument was defensible in 1970. It becomes harder to defend every year the hull continues to deteriorate. The most useful historical comparison for what the Richard Montgomery could do if it exploded is the Halifax disaster of December 1917. A French munitions ship called the Mont Blanc, loaded with approximately 3,000 tons of high explosives, including TNT and picric acid, collided with another vessel in Halifax Harbour in Nova Scotia and caught fire. When it exploded 20 minutes later, it obliterated everything within half a mile. Approximately 2,000 people were killed and 9,000 more were injured. The blast wave knocked people off their feet 2 miles away. Windows were broken 16 miles away. A tsunami generated by the explosion swept up the harbour. It remains the largest accidental explosion in human history before the atomic bomb. The Richard Montgomery contains roughly half the explosive weight of the Mont Blanc. It is sitting in open water rather than a harbour, which would reduce the shockwave damage to buildings. But the column of water and debris thrown upward would be catastrophic. A 1970 study by the Explosives Research and Development Establishment, commissioned by the British government itself, concluded that a detonation would hurl a 1,000-foot wide column of water, mud, metal and munitions nearly 10,000 feet into the air. A January 2022 assessment by researchers at Defence Research and Development Canada, published in New Scientist magazine, described a potential blast on this scale as one of the world's biggest non-nuclear explosions, causing widespread destruction and death. The wave generated, estimated at 5 meters in the direct impact zone, would swamp Sheerness completely and send significant surge up the Thames Estuary toward London. Sheerness has approximately 12,000 residents. Southend-on-Sea, 5 miles away on the opposite bank of the estuary, has approximately 180,000. The Port of London handles approximately 50 million tonnes of cargo per year through the Thames Estuary. The shipping lane that passes closest to the wreck carries LNG tankers, liquefied natural gas carriers, which pass within 150 metres of the exclusion zone on a regular basis. The MCA requires those tankers to travel with a 3-tug escort specifically because of the proximity to the Richard Montgomery. The exclusion zone around the wreck is 500 metres in diameter, marked by buoys and enforced by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. If anything enters the zone, 4 separate government bodies are automatically notified. The MCA, the Secretary of State's representative for Maritime Salvage and Intervention, the Receiver of Wreck, and the Duty Marine Manager. The monitoring infrastructure that exists around this wreck is more comprehensive than the monitoring of most nuclear installations. And still, the wreck continues to corrode. Plans to remove the masts of the wreck, which protrude above the waterline and could theoretically collapse through the deck onto the ordnance below, have been in discussion since at least 2020. A contract to remove them was announced and then delayed after surveys revealed the deck deterioration had accelerated. The concern is not the masts themselves, but the methodology. How do you cut through corroded steel masts on a ship loaded with live bombs without triggering the exact catastrophe you are trying to prevent? The government's stated position as of the most recent public statements is that the masts will be removed as soon as a safe operational methodology can be established. The people of Sheerness have lived with this for 80 years. The town itself is a few hundred metres outside the exclusion zone. Local politicians have raised the Montgomery in Parliament repeatedly. Medway Council gave it the nickname the Doomsday Wreck in 2012 in official documentation submitted to Parliament, which gives a sense of how the people nearest to it regard the situation. There are residents of Sheerness who were born after the ship sank, raised children after the ship sank, and will die before it is ever dealt with. The masts visible from shore are so familiar to locals that they have become something close to a landmark. The town's relationship with the wreck is the kind of unresolved thing that becomes normalized simply by lasting long enough. I find this story harder to put down than almost anything I have covered on this channel, and the reason is a simple one. The ships we usually talk about, the Bismarck, the Yamato, the Shinano, they are on the floor of deep oceans thousands of miles from anywhere people live. They are remote, inaccessible, preserved by depth and distance. The Richard Montgomery is in 15 meters of water less than 2 miles from a town. It is collapsing. It is getting worse. And the reason it is still there is not that anyone forgot about it, or that it sank somewhere no one could reach it. It is still there because the people responsible for it have spent 80 years calculating that moving it is more dangerous than leaving it alone. And hoping that they are right. The masts are still there. The bombs are still there. And the surveys keep coming back with the same word year after year to describe what they find. Deteriorating